Perek Mishna. The previous couple of Mishnayos have been discussing the relationship between an oven and its accessories, its handles, what's considered a yad, what's not considered a handle. This Mishnah starts discussing the relationship between an oven and the floor. If you remember, an oven is really just an open cylinder. They had a little hole in the bottom to put the fuel in, but it was really just open on both ends, and the ground was actually the floor of the oven. So they are sort of connected. So the Mishnah says, Tanur, an oven, shenosan boy offer ad chetzer, that you put dirt until halfway up. So if someone filled up his oven with dirt until halfway up the oven, so now the bottom part of the oven is now nullified because it's considered part of the ground, and only the top part is considered the oven. Even though the walls reach until the ground, these walls are considered part of the ground. And therefore, if tumah dips inside of the oven, only the top part of the oven becomes tameh. But the bottom part, which is considered the ground, doesn't become tameh. Now, if you remember, in this Perek in Mishna Gimel, Rabbi Meir said that the sages made a decree to consider any connection to a vessel to be part of the vessel. Over there in Mishna Gimel, it was regarding a pocket of an oven to hold spices, and Rav Meir said that pocket is considered part of the oven, even though midaraisa it has no connection to the oven, because the oven was made to cook, and the spice pocket was made to hold spices, and therefore they're considered two completely separate vessels. But midrabanan, the sages said to consider it all one vessel because they're connected. So here too in our Mishnah, even though midaraisa, according to the Torah, the bottom part of the oven is considered the ground, nevertheless, since it's connected to the top part of the vessel, midrabanan, it can become tameh. Now, interestingly, if you remember in Mishnah Gimel over there, Rabbi Shimon argued with Reb Meir, and he said that there's no decree to be mitame a portion of a vessel that's connected to a larger vessel. But interestingly, over here, Reb Shimon does not argue, because over here it's not two vessels connected. It's one oven that part of it became nullified, and therefore over here Reb Shimon does not disagree. And even Reb Shimon will hold that if the top part becomes tameh, the bottom part also becomes tameh as a decree midrabanan. However, once we have this decree midrabanan, that when the top part of the vessel becomes tameh, the bottom part also becomes tameh, now we're very concerned. Because if people might start thinking that the bottom part of the oven is tameh from the Torah, when really it's just a decree from the sages. And we're concerned that if truma food touches the bottom part of the oven, people might come to burn the truma. They'll think it's really, really tameh, when really it's just a decree midrabanan. So therefore, since we're concerned about that, we made an oddity in the decree, something odd about the decree, which will remind everyone that this is only a decree midrabanan and it's not from Torah law. And that oddity is that when an avatuma, for example a sheretz, if a sheretz dips in the avir, the bottom part of the oven does not become tameh. And only if the sheretz touches the inside of the vessel, only if the sheretz touches it, only then do we make the decree that the bottom part becomes tameh. And that's an oddity, because generally speaking, we don't differentiate between how the oven became tameh. And therefore people will remember that this is only a decree midrabanan. So let's read that inside. Tanur, an oven, shenosan boyofer an chetzer, that you placed in dirt until halfway up. May offer ulamatan, from the dirt and below. Mitame b'maga, will become tameh when the top part becomes tameh with maga, if a sheretz touches the top part. But may offer ulamalan, but the top part of the oven is mitame b'avir, even becomes tameh if the sheretz goes into the airspace. Now the second case of the Mishnah revolves around a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim regarding a pasuk in Vayikra. The pasuk says regarding a tameh oven, Tanur v'kirayim yutatz. A baking oven or a cooking oven you have to demolish. Tameim heim, they're tameh utmeim yu lachem, and they'll be tameh to you. This pasuk shows that you can't simply dip an oven in a mikvah to make it tar. You need to demolish it to be mitayr it. Now demolish yutatz. Yutatz means it was attached to the ground. Attached. And you're demolishing it. So Rabbi Yehuda is wondering, who said the oven was attached to the ground? Who says? It must be, says Rabbi Yehuda, that an oven can only become tameh in the first place if it was first attached, if it was first connected to the ground. Now the pasuk ends off, Tameim heim, they're tameh u'tameim yu lachem. It says 2 times that it's tameh. Now that's coming to include something. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's including an oven that became not attached to the ground. Even that oven is susceptible to tumah, and it only needs to be attached to the ground the first time you use it which cures the oven, it hardens its walls, and then it's susceptible to Tumah even after it's disconnected to the ground. So Rabbi Yehuda holds only the first time that the oven is used, it has to be attached, and then even if you disattach it, it is still susceptible to Tumah. Now the Rabbanan argue with Rabbi Yehuda, they hold that an oven never needs to be mechuber, never needs to be attached to the ground. And the pasuk only says yutat's demolishing to teach you that even an oven that's attached is susceptible to Tumah. Because generally speaking, anything that's attached to the ground, like a house, etc., is not susceptible to Tumah. This is teaching us that even an oven which is attached to the ground is makabel Tumah. So there's a machlokes whether an oven has to be attached to the ground during its first usage. Now our Mishnah is zeroing in on Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, who holds that it does need to be attached to the ground. Now remember, generally speaking, the ovens were hollow, they were open on both sides, and therefore when they were placed on the ground, by default it's considered connected, attached to the ground, because the ground is its floor, and therefore it's considered attached. But let's say there was a hole in the ground, and you placed the oven in the hole. That's also for sure considered attached to the ground, because the ground is holding it up, and therefore it's deemed connected to the ground. What our Mishnah deals with is an oven which is too narrow to be held up by the walls, and you need to stick in a rock, you have to wedge a rock in to keep it from falling down. Is this type of oven considered connected to the ground? It's not being held up by the ground, it's being held up by this rock. And therefore Rabbi Yehuda says it depends. If the fire on the bottom is hot enough to cure the oven, which remember, it has to be hot enough to bake those sponge cakes, to harden the walls of the oven. If the fire on the bottom of the hole gets hot enough to do that, then the oven is considered connected to the ground because it's using the heat from the ground to cure it. But if it doesn't get hot enough at the bottom, and you have to build a bottom to your oven to place the heat in order for it to get hot enough to cure it, then it's not considered connected to the ground. So let's read it inside. Nisano al pi habor, if you place the oven on top of a pit, o al pi hadus, or on top of walls. A dus is just a circular brick structure on the floor, and you've placed the oven on top of the dus, but again it's too narrow to hold the oven, and therefore the Mishnah says v'nosan sham even, you wedged in a stone to hold up the oven. So is that considered connected to the ground? So Rabbi Yehuda says, Im masik mil matan, if when you heat it up from the bottom of the pit or from the bottom of the dus, v'hu nisuk mil malon, it gets heated up at the top of the oven, so much so that it could cure the oven, it could make it hot enough to cook those sponge cakes, then tameh, then the oven is considered connected to the ground, and now it's susceptible to tumah. The Chachamim say, Hoel, since the husak mikol makom, since it got heated up, tameh, it's tameh. If you remember that the Chachamim argue with Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim say it never needs to be attached to the ground, and therefore the Chachamim say if it gets hot enough, then it's tameh. It doesn't matter if it's attached or not. Now it's your turn to read the Mishnah.